Now that we've studied about the various types of attributes that psychologists assess, we now focus on the methods of assessment, which will be part 4 of this chapter. And the mnemonic that I've given for remembering these methods of assessment is called PICOS. PICOS. Right. So what is a psychological test? It is an objective and standardized measure. Right. So we start with P, which is psychological test. So what is a psychological test? It is an objective and standardized measure of what? Of an individual's mental or behavioral characteristics. So if you divide the word psychological test into psych and test, if you just focus on these two words, from test we get that it is standardized and it is objective, because let's say you're writing an exam, so the scoring key is the same, right? So let's assume it's an MCQ test. So the scoring key is the same. So everybody is scored on the same basis and all your scores can be compared. Okay. So from that we get that it is objective and it is a standardized measure. Measure of what? Then we come to the word psych. What does psychology focus on? Of an individual's mental and or behavioral characteristics. So psychology typically focuses on an individual's mental and or behavioral characteristics. So a psychological test is an objective and standardized measure of an individual's mental or behavioral characteristics. Right. So it measures all the dimensions of psychological attributes. So earlier we had studied there was personality, values, intelligence, aptitude, interest. And what exactly is this test used for? So why do we assess using a psychological test? This can be used for clinical diagnosis. Let's say somebody might have symptoms of depression. Using this, we can validate that. So somebody might use it for guidance, career counseling, personnel selection, placement, and for training purposes as well. Right. So for personality, there are projective tests as well, which will be studied later. Second, we have I in PICOS, which stands for interview. So what do you typically do in when you think about an interview? You tend to think about an individual going for a job interview, for an internship, for a college interview. So you seek information from a person on a one-to-one basis. So it's just you and the interviewer or a panel of interviewers, right? So you seek information from an individual on a one-to-one basis, usually one-to-one. So the example that I have given is one of my own. So it's a very funny one where I had a college interview and the interviewer asked me why. I had prepared a lot of stuff regarding my research projects, regarding what I did in school. And so the interviewer asked me why I wanted to join that university, and I hadn't prepared for that answer. And so I just told her that the reason why I wanted to join was because my aunt said that it's a great university, and that was that. And yeah, so very bad interview, but moving on. So the examples that are given in the book regarding interview is when, let's assume, a counselor interacts with a client. So it's a one-on-one basis. Then a salesperson surveys how you feel about a product, and based on that the company decides whether they should continue with the product, whether they should make any modifications or not. Then employer selects employees for jobs. Then journalists seeking information from important people. There might have been a political issue regarding which the journalist wants to know more, so they approach important individuals at a higher position to get to know more about that political issue in depth, right? So this is interview, where you seek information from an individual on a one-to-one basis. Third from PICOS is C, which stands for case study. So what is case study? The definition given in the book is it is an in-depth study. In-depth is the keyword here. It is an in-depth study of the individual in terms of his or her psychological attributes, psychological history, in the context of his or her psychosocial and physical environment. So I'll repeat the definition again so that it settles in. So it is an in-depth study of what? Of an individual in terms of what? In terms of his or her psychological attributes, psychological history, in the context of his or her psychosocial and physical environment. So to remember this definition, I'll give you an example. So let's say there's an individual who says that his leg hurts, but there seems to be no physical cause, right? So what would you do in a case study? So you ask him, when did the pain start? Was it always there? Has he undergone any major life change, etc.? So major life change is the psychosocial part, right? The physical pain is the physical aspect of it, right? So you ask the psychological history of the individual, psychosocial history of the individual, and you look at the physical environment of the individual as well. Maybe he's working in a very high stress environment due to which this could start happening. So case study is an in-depth study of an individual in terms of his or her psychological attributes. You check for any hysteria in the individual which might be causing it, any other problems, psychological history. So you focus on psychological attributes first, then you look at the psychological history, whether the person has undergone any major loss, any major stress, right, in the context of his or her psychosocial and physical environment. Now, who uses these case studies? So clinical psychologists use these case studies to understand their client better so that they can give more curated solutions for them and help them better. And people, maybe another example which is given in the book is that people use these case studies to look at case studies of great people to get them inspired. Although this, in my personal opinion, this does not work really well. But sure, a lot of people do get inspired and start with their journey that way, by getting inspired from looking at very famous people. So case study uses different methods of data collection. So when you're doing a case study on somebody, you use an interview method. You might collect information from them on a one-to-one basis. You might observe them in their natural environment. You may give them a questionnaire, or you may administer psychological test to test for various psychological attributes. The last Then we come to S, which is self-report. I think I forgot observation. I accidentally forgot observation in my notes. I'll add it later. So observation, it involves employing systematic, organized and objective procedures, right? So here again we have except organized and objective is the same. S has changed from standardized to systematic. So what is observation? It essentially means that you're looking at somebody, you're observing somebody's behavior in their natural environment, right? So involves employing systematic, organized and objective procedures to record behavioral phenomena occurring naturally in real time. So you're not observing individuals in a clinical setting which is controlled by the researchers. You're actually looking at people in their real environment. Let's say you're looking at children playing in a park. That is observation, right? So certain phenomena such as mother-child interactions can be easily studied through observations. The major problem with observational methods are that the observer has little control over the situation and the reports may suffer from subjective interpretation of the observer. So this part is very important because it states two problems with observation method. So what are these two problems? First, it is that it is open to subjective interpretation. What does this mean? Let's say a child might be behaving a certain way, right? So one researcher might think that there is one reason why the child is behaving that way. The other researcher might think of some other reason why that child is behaving that way. So the situation is open to subjective interpretation. So the interpretation of one researcher might not be the same as the interpretation of another researcher. And second problem is that there are a lot of other factors that might affect whatever you want to observe. So let's say you want to observe the interaction of a mother with her child, and so you are in very little control of the other variables that might affect this interaction, right? So this was about observation. It involves employing systematic, organized and objective procedures to record behavioral phenomenon that occurs naturally in real time. We now move on to the last assessment method, which is S, self-report. So what exactly is self-report? If you divide the words and you look at them separately, you see it means that you're reporting yourself, you're telling stuff about yourself. So person provides factual information about himself or herself and or opinions and beliefs that they hold. So what do we get to know about when they tell us about their opinions or their beliefs? We get to know about their thinking process and how they carry themselves in real life. What beliefs they shape your values shape your behavior, right? So let's take the example of a guy who thinks men should not cry. Obviously, I am not in support of this opinion, but this is just a belief that this guy holds. So from this we get to know that this individual might be scared of feelings, of his own feelings. That is why he thinks so. So self-report is again what? It is when a person provides factual information about himself or herself and or opinions or beliefs that they hold, based on which we get to know a lot about that person, right? So data collection here, information can be through interview or a schedule, questionnaire, psychological test, or through a personal diary. You get to know their thoughts, get to know about a person's thoughts, feelings, etc. That is how data is collected here. And with this we come to end of part 4.